All right, this is Responsible Beverage Service Training, otherwise known as RBST. I am Officer Ockman, along with Officer Wright from the New Ulm Police Department, who will be hosting this event. This is the online version. Really encourage anyone watching this to attend one of our actual in-person. Usually goes better being able to take questions and stuff, but this is the next best thing. Also note just that Clevin Duncan is the Responsible Beverage Service Liaison for the state through the Department of Public Safety, Alcohol, and Gambling Enforcement. We're going to get into it. I'm going to go pretty fast here in this presentation. Obviously, if you need to, since it's online, take your time, pause the slides, but we're going to get through a lot of information here, but it's important information and we're going to try to go quick. Logistics and ground rules, being online, we don't need to worry about this. Course guidelines, we're basically going to go through 4 sections, starting with alcohol, moving on to a cannabis section, then ID section, and then we'll follow that up with a compliance check. The purpose of this presentation is to increase awareness of impaired drivers, decrease alcohol-related crashes, injuries, and death, and reduce underage consumption. And then we're going to touch a little bit on cannabis products since that's a new thing coming through here. So the mission is, obviously, if you're watching this, I'm hoping you're a licensee, seller, or server of some kind of alcohol, and we're going to have to teach you some responsible ways to make sure you understand some of the laws behind it and the reasons for doing what you're doing. Again, we want you to be that first line of defense to not overserve alcohol or to give underage consumption. So we're going to get right into it, the alcohol and the drinking culture that we have. So the basic premise between alcohol here, and this is the reason for the class, if you remember anything, is the proactive approach. We're looking for you to protect your customers, protect your business, protect yourself. 3 basic premises, but very, very important. Again, we hope as a human being you care about other people, you want to protect your customers, right? And if you're a business owner or working for a business, you want to protect your business, and then just thinking on a selfish moment, we want you to protect yourself. Because we're going to go through here that if there is failures or there is issues, it does fall on not just the business on the civil side, but it can be criminal issues for the individual selling the alcohol. So the big 3-point plan of this whole thing: do not overserve customers, do not sell to intoxicated individuals, and do not sell or serve to underage customers. Seems pretty basic, but that is the 3-point plan. If you follow that, you'll be good to go. So, defining the drinking culture, I think here specifically I will even say in New Ulm, obviously we have a brewery right here in town, and a lot of the events are centered around alcohol. That's just the way specifically New Ulm is, but in general we have a drinking culture of kind of that traditions of having alcohol and doing stuff like that. The one notable thing here is statistics coming out from the CDC. I fall into this blue group of people. I don't consume a lot of alcohol. I'm not going to be the one keeping businesses going. But 8% of people that consume alcohol consume 51% of the alcohol out there. So it's notable to think that a large part of this class is designated for those 8% of the population. Again, drinking times have changed. People are drinking to get intoxicated. There's games, it's a competition, recognition. And obviously the pandemic did change some things on the culture of drinking and staying at home and stuff like that. So just some of the notable things: keg stands, beer bongs, beer mile, shotgunning, flippy cup or flip cuppers, boat races. You know, the creativity of some of these games when it involves alcohol. And the problem with the games too is then there's no harm in them in themselves, but they just tend to lead to over drinking when you start playing games like that, or it becomes a competition that obviously some people are going to be very inclined to get more intoxicated. And that's where we're concerned about, specifically as a business and then us as law enforcement. Alcohol by volume, again, these are the standard drink sizes. You know, standard sizes really haven't changed, but obviously in a business, depending on how you're pouring those drinks, the size of those drinks. And then just be aware, obviously, like our craft beers. You know, the standard beer is a 5% APV, but I know there are some craft beers out there and stuff that are way higher than that. So again, when someone says, hey, I had one drink, you know, what does that really mean? Are they really only getting their 5-ounce glass of wine, or are they getting something more? Okay, over-serving customers we're going to kind of get into. So what is obviously intoxicated? This is the question I get asked. This is what's going to be in the statute that I'll cover, but the standard for determining is obviously intoxicated is when exercising reasonable powers of observation, one sees or should see a person is intoxicated. I.e. the standard is if you asked the general population, is this person intoxicated, the general people would be able to say, yes, there's an issue with this individual, they're showing signs of intoxication. And then Minnesota statute 348.502 is the concerning the obviously intoxicated person. And then just to note, no person may sell, give, furnish, or in any way procure for another alcoholic beverage for the use of an obviously intoxicated person. So the state recommends the green, yellow, red serving thing. Where green, obviously, there's no signs of intoxication with this individual. You know, yellow is they're starting to show signs that they've had a little bit too much to drink, and red is the obvious one. Now, the question always is between that red and that yellow, right? Because it's different for different people, so the issue is going to always be between that yellow and that red where people are at. For my statistic people out there, this is the latest 2022 crashes from Minnesota. Notable, we had 1,548 more arrests for DUIs than we did last year. 70 more alcohol-related crashes and 10 more deaths than last year. So the problem is, unfortunately, increasing rather than decreasing. It always, just amazes me that 1 in 7 Minnesota drivers has a DUI on their record. And the majority are at a 0.15. July has the most DUIs, and 7% of DUIs happen in the summertime. And then the graph on the right side, the impaired, I always think that one's interesting just because it shows the age group at which we get DUIs, and you can see it pretty much spans the spectrum. It is probably what most people would be inclined to think of how our younger adults are probably more inclined, but you can see that it goes all the way up. So it's a phenomenon that goes from our young adults all the way up. And again, the reason for a lot of this stuff too, we were concerned about people over drinking, is just how alcohol lowers ambition, impairs judgment, and again, it just increases the likelihood of risky behavior. And then the statistic for percentage of crimes involving alcohol, you can see domestic abuse, child abuse, sexual assaults, robberies there's a higher likelihood if there's alcohol involved for those to happen. So, sale restrictions. So, this is another one that people, again, it's Minnesota statute, you can see up there, 7515.0590, sub 3. But again, this is the big one. Retailers shall refuse to sell any alcoholic beverage to any person or persons whose character is questionable or whose credentials in any manner are not satisfactory. For me in law enforcement, it's a big thing, the word shall. A lot of statutes will have the words either may or shall. May gives some options, some discretion for people to do. Shall means they will happen. So by law, it says you shall refuse if someone is behavior is questionable or their credentials are not good. And again, later in the presentation, I'll get into the ID portion of it. And this is where, for my licensee owners, my business owners and stuff, whoever has that license, the person that has the license is responsible for the conduct of the sale of beverages in there. So even if one of the employees sells alcohol, the business is going to face, the licensee is going to face it whether they were there or not. So that's just one thing to note, that for at least our licensees, our business owners, you can't just say like, oh, that was one of my employees, that, it's on them. It's like, it is partly on them for the criminal side of it and stuff, but the civil side will still fall upon the licensee. Getting into the civil penalty portion of it, local ordinances may be more restrictive, but this is from the state statute. This is what the fines you're looking at, up to a $2,000 alcohol fine. But I'm going to specifically get into the next slide here. This is the local New Ulm chapters one, so this is probably why most of you are watching this right here. These are the minimum penalties presumed by the New Ulm chapter. This is specifically chapter 5. But when you're looking at this, the top one is the regular penalty grid. So if not enough employees have gone through the best practices, and this is part of the best practices, is having employees go through this class, the violations are up top. And the big one is, again, like first violation, $500, and that 5-day suspension is pretty big for a business. 5 days of not being able to sell alcohol can be pretty detrimental depending on the business you have. But if you're part of that best practices, in general, the first violation is $250. And then we're working on that education thing with that. Just note that obviously when we do, or there is violations, and again, I'll get into the how I assess those violations and how we do compliance checks and stuff like that. But all this stuff eventually goes to the city council, and it is their discretion on how they're going to apply these penalties and such going forward. But this is what's in our city chapter, and this is what the grid looks like right now. Going back, signs of intoxication, if this was an in-person class, we'd kind of go through this more, but kind of your obvious signs of intoxication, that smell and odor of alcohol, your slurred speech, watery eyes, aggressiveness. Some people get loud. Obviously, some people get really quiet. If someone started very loud in the establishment but then got really quiet, maybe there's something going on there. obviously that hostility and fighting, change of personalities. There's a whole host of things, and obviously those with experience dealing with people serving this stuff, you're going to see those signs more regularly, but these are just some of the things to look at. One of the things they go through is the SCAB, speech, coordination, appearance, behavior. You can kind of pause the slideshow if you need to and kind of go through it, but it's just going through kind of the 4 major aspects of what happened with alcohol and kind of the general things of where they are from sober to just slightly influenced to intoxicated. And then again, this is another one, big one, how long does alcohol stay in your system? A lot of the alcohol consumption is based off of obviously physiology of the individual, but it goes from male to female. A lot of it has to do with body weight and chemistry and stuff like that. But the general rate of dispersion or getting alcohol out of your system is a 0.015. That really doesn't change a lot for individuals. It's pretty consistent for the most part. So like in this one goes, if you're a 0.08, it's going to take you about 5.3 hours to go from that 0.08 for your body to get rid of the entirely. Doing food afterwards and stuff isn't going to change that level of getting it down. It might slow the absorption of it down a little bit. That's why you'll see people try to eat food and stuff like that, drink water. But the alcohol's still in your system and is going to still get removed at about that rate of 0.015. And then this is the chart. I've seen this chart a lot out there, but it's the blood alcohol concentration chart. It gives a very rough idea of someone's body weight and then how many standardized drinks. Remember, standard drinks, and that's the thing you gotta remember. We'll have people say, well, I only had 2 drinks. Well, sometimes those true drinks are way above the standard, but for standardized drinks, you can kind of see the grid on where they're gonna be at roughly for blood alcohol content. And then I'll get into the cost of a DUI. Again, if the individual does get a DUI, obviously the total cost, I know this slide has it estimated at $10,000 to $25,000. That factors in many things such as attorney fees, tows, your insurance going up, the criminal charges and stuff like that. And then this one goes for, turning over the keys, safe ride home, $25 to $50, grabbing an Uber, calling a friend, doing what you got to do to get out of there. But again, DUIs are very expensive and a very big issue. There is a cost to this, so when you're trying to get with some of those people who are getting upset, or hey, you're not wanting to give them a drink, or you're trying to encourage them to get rides, this is one way to maybe encourage them, like, hey, it's not worth it. Not only the endangerment to someone by driving impaired, which is obviously the utmost importance, you can also hit that financial side, like, man, if you get a DUI, how financially devastating that could be. And then again, the big thing, whose life are you saving? The life saved is likely to be the customer you served, because the fatality rate generally, we have that giant portion here, 63% is the impaired driver. And of course, there are other concerns of all the passengers and everyone else coming through. But the impaired drivers have statistically the highest rate of being killed in a crash related to drinking. So lawsuits, if nothing else, if my criminal side doesn't hit, if you see me doing compliance checks, one of the big things is the civil lawsuits that are going to come by if there are any issues related to over-serving customers, DUIs, all that stuff. Because if death or great bodily results, there's probably going to be a felony lawsuit or at least a civil lawsuit facing you. And again, these lawsuits, not only the licensee and the business, you're going to have your insurance company be involved, the seller, and your server, and again, the city and county is going to be involved. It's going to be a big, big deal if we have some issues with alcohol where someone ends up with great bodily harm or death. And that's what we're trying to avoid. If you pay attention to the class here and you don't overserve a customer, and if you don't serve to underage, we're going to eliminate most of this, and that's what we're going for. You see these things in the headlines all the time. These are random headlines that have been picking up from the nation of just issues that have happened due to either over-serving or the serving of minors. This one's probably a local one. I don't know if people remember this one, but 2013. This is from from Shakopee. Basically, an individual who was clearly and heavily intoxicated went into a store, bought a 6-pack. No one checked on him. No one did anything. He left the store, and then he was found the next morning in a snowbank, and he had died with a beer in his hand. And the person was charged with selling to an obviously intoxicated person because the signs are clear that they should not even have sold that 6-pack to him. And again, they did nothing else to get him help or call anybody on it. This is what we're trying to avoid. Don't want to see anybody in the headlines. And then again, this is getting into those servers. Again, this would be, again, to encourage you to attend the in-person one so we can kind of have these conversations in person, but when to say when. This is the tricky part for the business owners. This is where you have to have that conversation with your employees to make sure that they know they can and should say it's enough for those employees. And again, if you are a server of alcohol, this is where you need to step up and make sure you are not over serving them. So again, we encourage people, obviously settle that tab first, get the bill taken care of, that way you can take care of that portion of your business. But you got to be kind of firm at this point, because some people are going to be argumentative, some are not. But just stay calm, and you can give them the reasons why you're not going to serve them anymore. Just be respectful about that. And then again, take those steps to make sure they're not driving, offer them rides, do what you got to do to get them on their way safely, but to not continue to serve them alcohol. And then we'll kind of get into, you know, if we were in-person class, some of those methods of how people go about that. Again, offering them food, serving them, say, hey, can I get you some water or maybe a Sprite, some other non-alcoholic drink to get them going. Help them arrange transportation. It might be a good time, depending on the situation, to notify law enforcement. And again, it's your responsibility to kind of go through that portion of it. Businesses are encouraged to do incident logs if that is so inclined. Again, you have to check with your business, your guys' procedures on how you do that. This isn't mandatory, but these incident logs are just a way of encouraging of, hey, what was important? You kind of just get the general facts of what happened with this individual and how it was handled and stuff. And again, this has a note here, great asset against lawsuits. If something ends up happening, you would have written documentation of how you guys handled that situation and what you did. And then getting into the underage access to alcohol. Again, underage drinking is, it's a serious problem. Alcohol is the most widely used drug for our youth, and again, there's lots of issues related to alcohol. One of them, obviously, it's against the law for them to drink if they're under 21, but also some of the health issues and stuff that come from it. Again, this is getting into the Minnesota statute of 348.503. This is where it makes it illegal for them to consume, purchase, possess, or enter the premise of an establishment that does alcohol. And then it goes up for misdemeanor, gross misdemeanor, felonies, depending on the situation and what's going on there. Big one to note is this one. It's the felony statute of 348.701. It's a felony to serve a person who violates the provision of the previous one, just like providing alcohol to minors, becomes intoxicated and causes death or great bodily harm. This is probably the biggest liability lawsuit for those people that get into it, is obviously if you either overserve, but specifically for this statute, if you serve to a youth, an underage youth, and they end up causing great bodily harm or death, this is where this one's going to come, and this is a felony. And again, we want people to stay free of penalties. We want to make sure everybody's an adult customer. And again, I'll get into some of those IDs and stuff at the end of the presentation. Again, don't do guesswork, verify all the stuff. Be vigilant, and again, we don't want, because what we have, and when I go through it, the complacency is what generally leads to a lot of sales and stuff like that, and that's what we're trying to avoid. And then some points of clarification that always come up. You got to be 18 years or older to serve alcohol. The only exceptions are if it's a family-owned business and the parents are present, then you can have one of your own children serving that, or if, pretty rare case, but if you have a 17-year-old high school graduate, they can also serve liquor. So you got to have your individuals that are selling alcohol or giving out those beverages have to be at least 18 years old. When we get into alcohol restriction on the ID, some of the IDs you'll see what we call a B card violation, or on the back of their ID say alcohol restriction. That is for law enforcement to do. It has nothing to do with your business. So if they are of legal age, this is a legal ID, and you have no reason to believe they're overly intoxicated, you can serve them alcohol. Those restrictions on the back are for us as law enforcement to deal with, where if we end up seeing an individual that is intoxicated on those IDs, or that has alcohol in their system, and we deal with them, we send a thing into the state saying they violated that portion of their driver's license, and then they get further civil restrictions on that. It does come up occasionally, like a pregnant customer. Again, this is enforced by policy, not by law. Obviously, there's some concerns where you might want to report that, and those will go to Human Services to be addressed. But there's also some issues related to that. You're going to want to check with your lawyers if you're going to do any of those things, because an individual who's pregnant could be part of a protected class, and if you deny them some service because of that, you're going to run into some civil issues. So that's not for me to deal with. If you have any concern with pregnant customers, again, check with your own lawyers for your own policy or how you want to handle your policy for the business, And if I would encourage people, if there is some concerns about that, to either report that to law enforcement or to our human services so we can look further into that. Power hours are a thing of the past now. They're gone. For those that don't know, the power hours where you turn midnight. At midnight, you turn 21, and bars are generally open till 1 in the morning, so you had that power hour from midnight to 1 to drink a lot of alcohol. I think I was actually one of the last times to have power hour. I think it's been gone for, oh, good, almost 20 years now, maybe 18, 19 years. But so now what it is your birthday begins 8 a.m. the day of when it comes for liquor services. So that eliminates that power hour type thing for that. So you shouldn't be serving anyone, shouldn't be shouting that they just turned 21 at midnight, and then you should be serving them liquor. That's a no-go. And then again, serving minors with parents present, that is a Wisconsin thing, not a Minnesota thing. That doesn't happen here. There's exemptions for minors to drink at their own residence with their parents present, but at all these establishments and stuff, anywhere anyone here should be serving liquor, buying, doesn't matter if their parents are present, they can't drink. And then just to recap, the big one, again, 3-point plan. These are the big things to remember. If you take anything from this portion of the alcohol thing is, again, don't overserve customers, don't sell to intoxicated individuals, and just don't sell or serve to underage customers. And obviously I would take questions if this was in person, but we're going to move on to the next one, the cannabis. And I'll turn it over to Officer Wright.
So I'm going to talk about the cannabis section. So in Minnesota, Minnesota is the 23rd state to enact legislation legalizing adult use recreational cannabis. As of August 1st, 2023, it is legal for adults aged 21 and over to possess, use, and grow cannabis at home. Retail sales at dispensaries likely won't open for at least around 2025. So the main uses of cannabis, you have CBD. People tend to use CBD for things like anxiety, stress relief, or nerve pain. THC is the other one. It's well known for its ability to make people feel high, but it's also responsible for its potential medical benefits. So the primary types, the stevia strain often has lower levels of CBD and higher levels of THC, and it's commonly associated with that mind high or an energizing effect. The indica strain often has higher levels of CBD, but the THC content isn't necessarily lower. Indica is commonly associated with that deep relaxation effect. Both have been reported to help reduce nausea, pain, and increase appetite. The effects of cannabis on your body, much like tobacco smoke, cannabis smoke is made up of a variety of toxic chemicals that includes ammonia and hydrogen cyanide, which can irritate your bronchial passages and lungs. THC moves from your lungs into your bloodstream and throughout your body. Within minutes, your heart rate may increase by 20 to 50 beats per minute. That rapid heart rate can continue for up to 3 hours. THC triggers your brain to release large amounts of dopamine, that feel-good chemical. It's what gives you that pleasant high. Very large doses of cannabis or high concentrations of THC can cause hallucinations or delusions. And it also causes an increase in your appetite, and that is common when taking any form of THC. And then secondhand smoke contains THC, the compound responsible for the most psychoactive effects. The THC can be passed to infants and children through secondhand smoke, and people exposed can experience psychoactive effects such as feeling high. Recent studies have found strong associations between reports of having someone in the home who uses marijuana and the child having detectable levels of THC. Children exposed to THC are potentially at risk for negative health effects. More research is needed to understand how second-hand marijuana exposure may affect children. And then this is just some statistics on cannabis. So cannabis is one of the most used drugs in the United States. In 2021, 35.4% of young adults aged 18 to 25 reported using marijuana in the past year. In 2022, 30.7% of 12th graders reported using marijuana in the past year, and 6.3% reported using marijuana daily. In 2022, nearly 20.6% of 12th graders reported that they vaped marijuana in the past year, and 2.1% reported that they did so daily. And then with alcohol and cannabis combined, there's some slang that goes with it. So this is crossfading. So what does crossfading mean? So the term crossfaded generally refers to the effects of combining cannabis with alcohol and is a relatively well-known slang term. It's a very common party trend among young adults. And how do you get crossfaded? Getting crossfaded happens when someone consumes both cannabis and alcohol, leading to physical effects that are different or more intense than would occur for either substance alone. Sometimes this can be a surprise to the person getting crossfaded because when taken together, the effects become magnified and people start to freak out. So green out, what does green out mean? The distressing feeling of nausea and anxiety from too much THC occasionally happens, again, when you're just taking too much. The causes, so greenouts can occur when consuming cannabis in high doses. In most cases, this involves eating edibles. A standard edible dose is 10 milligrams of THC. For edibles, since the way our stomach acids affect THC, orally administered cannabis can take much longer to kick in. Sometimes people consume more before the process finishes, amplifying the effects. And so some symptoms, the symptoms of this can cause lightheadedness, nausea, and vomiting that can sometimes occur when someone uses cannabis. These symptoms are caused by the body's inability to process the THC in cannabis. Green out can be a very unpleasant experience, but it's typically resolved within a few hours. And some treatments, some ways to handle green outs. Staying calm might help, or if you sit and lie down. Eat or drink to boost your blood sugar. Staying hydrated. Squeeze a lemon. Smell crushed peppercorns. And talking to someone. So these are just all some treatments that may help you if you are experiencing a green out. And then mixing alcohol and cannabis. So alcohol before cannabis, drinking before using cannabis can intensify its effects. This is because alcohol increases the absorption of delta-9, or THC. This generally results in a stronger high. And then if you use cannabis before alcohol, using cannabis before drinking alcohol may minimize the effects of alcohol. This means you might be tipsier than you feel, increasing your risk for becoming overly intoxicated. If you use cannabis before drinking, pay extra attention to how much you've had to drink. Always assume that you've had a bit more to drink than you've had. So some other issues, you can end up with some brain development issues. So cannabis use can reduce memory and learning functions if you use before brain development is complete. This is part of the reason you must be age 21 or older to consume it. Mental health issues and psychoses. Substantial research indicates that individuals with a predisposition for or family history of precocious or substance use disorder should refrain from using cannabis, as it can trigger these conditions. A bad high, higher levels of THC, increased chance of negative reaction symptoms. or increase the chance of negative reaction symptoms such as panic, delusions, severe paranoia, extreme confusion, increased heart rate, and nausea and vomiting. Other issues associated with cannabis use is a new clinical condition characterized by vomiting, pain, and the desire to take a hot shower. It usually occurs in chronic users. And then some traffic safety and cannabis questions in Minnesota. So what kinds of cannabis products does the legislation legalize? The legalized products include edibles, topicals, concentrates, and marijuana flower. How much cannabis or products like THC can I legally have in my vehicle? If you are age 21 and older, you can have up to 2 ounces of cannabis flower, 8 grams of concentrated THC, and 800 milligrams of edible products. Can I use cannabis or products like THC edibles while driving? Just like how drinking alcohol in a vehicle is illegal, it's very important to remember that while in a vehicle, it's illegal for drivers or passengers to open any cannabis packaging, use marijuana, or consume other cannabis products. Drivers or passengers to have an unsealed container of marijuana, for example, 2 ounces in a Ziploc bag. The driver to be impaired by marijuana or other cannabis products. Driving high is a DWI. Violating any of these rules can lead to you being charged with a traffic offense. You may keep open product in the trunk of a car or another area not accessible by the driver or passengers. What is the legal limit for impairment with cannabis or products like THC edibles? While there is no legal limit like with alcohol at the 0.08 level, law enforcement can arrest a driver for DWI if they observe and document impairment. I'm a medical marijuana consumer. Can I still be arrested for DWI? Yes. Even as a medical consumer, if you are impaired by the product and driving, expect to be arrested for DWI. What if I have THC in my system because I frequently consume cannabis, but I didn't consume it before I got behind the wheel? Am I still at risk of driving impaired? It depends on when you last consumed the cannabis product. Impairment from cannabis is caused by active delta-9 THC, which becomes inactive over time. How is law enforcement trained to recognize impairment by cannabis or other substances besides alcohol? Law enforcement regularly looks for driver impairment of any kind. If a driver is impaired by alcohol or drugs, they will be able to detect it. Compliance questions. The new cannabis law is also establishes the Office of Cannabis Management under the Minnesota Department of Health as the cannabis regulatory authority. All questions should be referred to the Office of Cannabis Management or which is under the Minnesota Department of Health. They'll be answering all questions regarding cannabis and THC compliance and regulations. And then for more information, you can contact the number that you see on the screen or go to the website. And obviously we're not in person, so I'm not going to take any questions, and I will hand it back over to Officer Achman for ID check.
Perfect. And yeah, we'll get into the ID check in here. Yep, so that covers the alcohol and the new cannabis stuff. Again, marijuana is not a new thing, but just to note, it's obviously a new emerging market. And again, we're still waiting for a lot of guidance too. So any of those questions and stuff, please reach out to the Office of Cannabis Management and obviously your business, either licensee or owner, if you're going to start selling any of those products. And we just don't have a lot of the research behind all this yet to go forward and give you a lot of clear answers. But now we're gonna get into the ID checking portion of this. I know this comes up every time. So again, we wanna make sure part of that thing of not serving to underage is to make sure they have a good valid ID, and that would even be if person's overage. So if you look at all the IDs and the way the Minnesota law reads, with 5 categories, 50 states, there's about 800 different forms that would be legal and acceptable standards for Minnesota statute to say, yep, this person is allowed to drink. They go from a valid passport, valid military ID, valid state issued ID, valid state driver's license, and tribal IDs. And again, the big thing is if something seems off, the sale is probably too. And the idea here is for acceptable IDs is we're going through reasonable validation skills. So that's not picking up the license, doing one of these things where you put it to your face real quick and you put it down and you didn't really look. We want you to actually take that license and do an actual scan to make sure it's good. And I'll get into some of the security features specifically for the Minnesota ones, because obviously that's what you're going to see for the most part. And I'll just go back one slide here. I will note that you know, passports have their own obviously laser engraving and various security features. I don't know if anyone sees that a lot where people bring in a passport, but they are acceptable. I would say passports are kind of hard to forge, and if you don't know about a passport, try to get with someone that has one so you can see what a real passport looks like. Tribal identifications, obviously those are one of the acceptable ones. We have 11 tribes in Minnesota. The biggest one, they have their own forms of ID and stuff. Some have a end date, some do not. The biggest ones you're going to see though are probably from the Lower Sioux Reservation, just due to its proximity here to New Ulm. But the yellow, if they're under 18, and everyone else has the horizontal ones. So that's a quick, easy feature they added in to make sure that you can see from a pretty quick glance if they're over 21 or not. So if you get any vertical IDs, that should be a red flag on selling any alcohol or cannabis to them. You'll see the date of birth in the picture. We got one in the middle, one in the bottom. They got the USA blue up in the corner there. Security features, again, the state spends a lot of money if they're getting it from an actual thing. So if it's a newer license, it should have a really clean edge. Now obviously the bottom one is kind of how it's not cut clean, it's been rough. Now obviously if people have had their IDs for a while, that might happen. But if someone gives you what appears to be a fairly new ID, it should be a fairly clean cut on there. And if you notice on our IDs, the date of birth on the bottom is actually raised. It's got a tactile feature. So if someone's producing IDs, they generally don't have that. So if you run your finger across it and it's completely smooth, it's probably going to be a fake ID, or at least something you should look into. Another security feature is the initials and date of birth are actually in next to that little thing, I don't know how to describe the date of birth, the number 3 section. There's actually, if you look real close, it's there. And then if you hold it up to the light, Minnesota, you should see a perforated walleye up there. So that's a really quick way, especially in some of the dark lit areas and stuff, you should see the perforated. Not that people can't duplicate that. Again, these are just individual security features, but they should all line up. That's another way to just verify for yourself. Again, these security features are for you to say, like, if it ever anything happens, like, this appeared to be a real ID for me. We don't rely on the canoeist anymore. Those can be duplicated by a lot of stuff, and now we have a license, I'll get into that doesn't have that anymore. So that used to be a pretty decent security feature, but it's not one you should rely on anymore. And then there is a ghost image in the bottom right corner there, or yeah, the license, when you look at it, it should be a black and white image, except for there'll be a color image on the same day license, which I'll get into. And then if you look in that, there's an integrated background in the background. Some of the new printers don't always catch some of these fine details when they're duplicating these things. And then if you hold it just right, move the license plate or license back and forth, you should see the North Star State and some holograms and stuff built into the license. And then if you get a UV light, some places will get a UV light. Again, if you scan the license, you're going to see these holograms in the back. And there's also one on the back. There's a holographic image and their date of birth in the back of the license as well. So these are previous IDs. You should not see these anymore. I will touch base just a little bit, but again, the last one expired in 2022. So if anyone's coming to these are not, they're still valid IDs for like law enforcement and stuff to use, but they've expired. So by that expiration, that in and of itself should be a red flag for any alcohol sales. And then here's what I was talking about, the same day ID DL cards. The same day ones, there's a couple places now in Minnesota you can get a same day card. The difference is, again, the same day card won't have that canoeist, it won't have that tactile or raised date of birth or even have it there, and then it's got a color picture. The traditional licenses, when you go to the DMV and go look at it, you're going to have the canoeist there, you're going to have that raised DOB, and then you're going to have that black and white image. And then just a note for licenses, there is a driver's license for all, so as of the October 1st, 2023, anybody can get them, driver's license here in Minnesota. The one difference you'll see right away at the top, it says not for federal identification. So if you see that, it could be a very valid ID for that stuff, but that's what it is. It's if you ever see that not for federal identification, I mean it's a driver's license for all is generally When it comes to full face photos, Minnesota's got some different options now. And then just to note, so again, it used to be where you couldn't do that. Now you can have some hats and stuff on there and stuff like that. So that used to be for people that have been doing this long enough, it would be a red flag if they did it. Now there's some options to have hats and stuff like that. And then there is, with the self-designated descriptors, height, weight, eye color, and sex. Those are actually not required anymore. So you can't just go off those anymore, or they could be off and or not there. So just be aware. And there is a statute there, I have seen this once, but you can have a no photo variance on it. They have to fill out a special form at the DMV and not have it. So if you see this, this doesn't automatically mean it's a fake or bad ID. It's just obviously you're gonna have to do some digging, some extra checking into it to make sure you have a good sale. And then if there is invalidated IDs, again, we used to do where we'd clip the corner of the license if there was any issues or law enforcement issues or stuff like that where the license was invalidated. Now most places are going to the perforated, you'll see it say void perforated into it, very identifiable, very quick. Someone just can't give you the story that, yep, they had just accidentally got the corner clipped or something like that. Nope, now it should be perforated going forward. What always comes up is now the yellow forms, or should no longer be. Again, that ended with the old license and stuff. You shouldn't see any of those yellow forms. Everything is this white sheet of paper now. But to note on that white sheet of paper, it's not a standalone identification document. So just going back a slide here, if you have the driver's license that says void on it because they're getting a new license, they've applied either just per expiration or there's whatever issues and it says void, they got to have that license plus the white sheet of paper combined together can make a valid one. You know what I mean? You can kind of check both of them, make sure everything's working on that. But just note again, you shouldn't see the yellow, and this white sheet of paper in and of itself is not considered valid. Just a quick sample of fake IDs. Again, some people do a really good job of them, some do not. Some are pretty obvious. These are some of the sample ones at the front. It's kind of hard to see. You can see that holographic image, how some did a really good job of it, and some did not do such a good job of it. And same with the back of it. You can see just, it's kind of hard. You can probably pause the video if you need to, but some of the did a decent job of the holograms in the back, some did not. Again, these are all fake IDs from different places. And what it comes from a lot of that is, again, you can go online, you can make a lot of the IDs, you can get the equipment pretty much from anywhere nowadays. Again, just having the stuff isn't illegal in itself. Obviously, producing and stuff would be the issue, and having people pass, try to pass it as real identification. But just be aware, it's out there, it's online, you can get these IDs, people are selling them and making them. So when it comes to ID technology, some of this is great for your businesses, some of you do it. Again, like I said, you have those UV lights, you've got card readers and all that stuff. And these are great, helpful tools, but it still does not excuse, you still need to actually physically look at that ID, do some of those checkings on your human eyes. If you rely on this alone, you might run yourself into some trouble if it comes to either criminal or legal things, if you're just relying on this. Because some of those IDs that you can make, you can encode all that information into the bar strip. So if you scan the bar strip, it's going to give you the quote-unquote fake information, and that's not good enough. You need to look at that ID physically still. But again, these are just helpful tools to help you with that. But it's in and of itself, this is not the standalone, well, I scanned it in the thing, it said they were over 21. That's not going to be a defense that's going to be good if that's all you're using. So some of the ways that people help get through this is the plan to check, where it's photo match, legal age to buy, acceptable ID, not expired. The other one, OMG, old enough, too old, matches the picture and everything matches, and appears to be a genuine ID. Seizure, if you end up having what you believe is a fake ID, you can secure that. But just note, by Minnesota statute, if you seize that ID, if you believe it's been falsified, altered, classified, it shouldn't be used in the way it is, you have to notify us, law enforcement, within 24 hours. You can't post it up on the wall, you can't use it to take pictures, you can't use it to humiliate them or anything like that. You can't post, advertise, destroy. Just take that license, do what you got to do, and then within 24 hours, call us so we can get that license and do what we need to do. Identification resources, scan the QR code. Most of the distributors should be able to help you with this. I know I have one from about 2021, I think. This is an ID guide put together that has all 50 states and a lot of the licenses and what you're looking for in each state for security features and what looks like a valid ID. Again, so if you start getting a lot of these, I know we have some tourism here in the New Ulm area. Obviously, you're going to get some people from out of states. This could help identify some of that. And again, you can either try to get it yourself through here. I don't know what the cost of that is. Otherwise, for our, again, a lot of the distributors around the area should be able to either get you these or help you get you these. And obviously, we don't have any questions on that because we're not in person, but I'll go on to the last little section here, compliance checks. This is the big one. Again, I get a lot of questions are. Myself, I've been running checks for 7-8 years now here in New Ulm. Officer Wright's going to be helping me going forward here on compliance checks. So when I'm looking for in compliance, again, I should go back. What are compliance checks? That is when law enforcement like myself, anybody that has and I'll go here, anybody that has a liquor license to sell liquor, we go through and we're going to get some underage buyers and we're going to go through the town and we're going to attempt to buy alcohol to see if we get a sale. Why do we do this? Because A, they work, and the goal is to deter people from selling to underage. And it sends a strong message to the community that we care about our underage and we're not trying to sell to our youth. So again, just a reminder, again, it's unlawful to sell, barter, furnish, or give alcohol beverage to the person under 21 years of age. And the reason we can do this is sub 2, it allows for supervision of a responsible person over the age of 1 for training, education, or research purposes. And that's where it gives us our authority to go in and do these compliance checks. So when we do these checks, again, what I'm hoping for and what the goal is compliance. I want to send my buyer in, they attempt to buy, and the sale is denied. That is the ultimate goal that we're going for. That's what we're looking for. And to know with compliance checks, people that are selling alcohol, there's 2 portions of what's going to happen here if we have a sale. The first is the criminal side, which we're going to deal with. So whoever sells the alcohol to them, so i.e. the person, the bartender, the server, whoever it may be that sells them the alcohol, they're going to get the criminal statute here that says they sold to the underage person, the criminal section of it. We're then going to send our report down to City Hall, and you guys are going to get the civil portion of it, i.e. you violated your liquor license on that, and that's where we go back to that Chapter 5 grid of City of New Ulm where the City Council gets involved on a liquor license violation. So there's 2 parts to it. And then again, we'll get into how compliance checks are done. Basically, we get the list of who has a liquor license here in town, and then we get decoys to come work for us. We go through the process of how we want them to do it, and then we send them out there to see if they can get alcohol. Again, the question always comes up, ID versus no ID. The only thing I will tell you is we do not use fake IDs, so we're not going to try to trick you. This isn't meant to be a trick thing. You know, again, we're looking for compliance. I want to see that my sellers of alcohol here in town are actually taking the time to look at IDs or find out what something's a little suspicious and then deny that sale. That's what we're going for. So we're not trying to do necessarily trickery or anything. And again, I'm not going to do fake IDs. That's not a fair check. We're looking for compliance. And again, we don't disguise our buyers. We don't tell them to dress up. They are coming as is. And the thing is that we have people that are 18, 19, 20 years old that look older. So it's just something to be cautious over. Just looking at someone for age might not be, or just like, hey, they got a beard or they dress like this and I thought they were old enough. That's not a good enough defense. And again, big thing is we're looking for success here on turning that away. These are some of the reasons that I've been always told that, when I talk to these people and they have a sale and I have to go back into the business and talk to the person, too busy, right? Too busy a day, just didn't check. You know what I mean? Just, nope, not good. Customer looked old enough. Had that one a few times where it's like, yep, I thought they were old enough. It's like, well, you still got to check IDs and do your due diligence. And then another one, like I said beforehand, just not looking at that ID close. I've seen too many people, they take that ID, they kind of put it up to their face a little bit and put it back. I don't know if they're just checking the picture, if they're even reading it, but it's just not taking the time. It takes more than just a little half second to take a look at a license. You should check that date of birth, check that picture, check for some of those security features, and just make sure everything matches. And then again, I've had that trusted the buyer was the legal age. Or like, oh, I've seen them in here before, or I thought they were. Not going to work when it comes to a criminal or civil defense, and that's where we don't want to see you guys get in trouble. I would entertain questions, but obviously we don't have anybody here. So that's kind of the end of the presentation. Again, thank you for taking the time to view it and stuff. Please go back and stop at those slides, take a look at them. I really encourage anyone here looking at this, if you can get to one of our in-person presentations. It will be this presentation, but it's so much more interactive. We can take in some of those questions, some of those issues. Because we're dealing with people here, it's not always black and white. But if you have any issues, make sure you, for registration stuff here, make sure you contact Sue at the email address there. And again, if you have any questions from this presentation, here's our contact info. Either reach out to the New Ulm PD or reach out to Officer Wright or me by email, and we'll try to get those questions answered to you. So, thank you.